Meantime, Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin has been a vocal critic of Wall Street's focus on short-term gains, and now she's demanding answers from two nominees about their views on activism before she moves for confirmation. CNBC's Leslie Picker joins us here at Post 9 with more on that story. Leslie?
That's right, Bill. Two SEC nominees hang in the balance as one senator is demanding answers. Senator Tammy Baldwin has written letters to Robert Jackson and Hester Pierce with specific questions about activist investors, stock buybacks, and executive compensation. Without answers, Senator Baldwin has said she will not agree to a unanimous consent request to hold a vote on their confirmation. She wrote in the letters that the SEC has presided over this financialization of our economy, which has facilitated the looting of the American corporation by short-term shareholders. She adds that Wall Street's aggressive pursuit of short-term profits at the expense of long-term growth and jobs demands a response. These letters come on the heels of a bill that she reintroduced a few months ago called the Brokaw Act. That seeks to rein in the powers of activist investors through more stringent disclosures. We went to Brokaw, Wisconsin, the namesake for the bill, in August and found a shuttered paper mill in a town that pinned the blame on hedge funds. An activist invested in the paper mill's parent company in 2011, urging changes, and by December of that year, the Brokaw mill was closed, eliminating 450 jobs. In Senator Baldwin's letters from last week, she said that the SEC could make some of the changes that the Brokaw Act is looking to accomplish without congressional approval, guys.
Leslie, thank you, and stay right there. Joining us now is Senator Baldwin for more on this and an exclusive interview. And Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we mentioned that you're willing to hold up some of the nominees over this issue. What result are you specifically looking for before you're willing to let those go forward?
Well, first of all, just answers to the many questions I put forth in my letter. But the bottom line is that the SEC has statutory authority to do a number of the things that I'm calling for with regard to reining in activist hedge funds, as well as looking more closely at what's happened with stock buybacks. And in fact, the SEC plays a central role in why we're seeing the proliferation of stock buybacks that we're seeing. If I could just get into a little more detail at this moment on that. In 1981, corporations in America spent about $3.7 billion on stock buybacks. In '82, the SEC opened a safe harbor, and a few years later, by '84, it had expanded 900-fold to $36 billion. Today, if you look at the S&P 500 companies alone, just them for the past 5 years, we're talking $2.5 trillion. This is something that ought to be looked at very closely. I think it has major impacts on our economy, and the SEC heretofore has ignored my calls, ignored my calls through letters, ignored legislation that we've talked about in the Senate of the United States. And I think of our two new nominees, we need some answers.
Would you want to limit buybacks? Is that what you're getting at there? I mean, the feeling on Wall Street has been that corporations are unwilling to build factories or create more jobs because of the instability, the uncertain outlook for the economy at this point. They would do that if they had a better certain future that they felt. Otherwise, they have nothing else to do with this cash than to just return it to shareholders in the form of buybacks or dividends. But would you want to limit their ability to do that? Is that where we're going?
Well, what I've seen over the course of the time that the SEC has given them safe harbor is a proliferation of these buybacks. And what it has meant in especially manufacturing, which is a big sector in the state of Wisconsin, is rather than investing in their workers, whether through raises or training to deal with advanced manufacturing, whether they're not investing in equipment to upgrade old factories to keep them competitive on a global scale. We've seen all of this change as they've invested more and more in stock buybacks and dividend payouts. And frankly, frankly, the other issue I raise with regard to activist hedge funds, it's oftentimes at the urging of the activists. You know, I don't want to segue into too many topics, but the tax measure that is being debated on Capitol Hill right now, when we talk about repatriation of dollars from overseas, many corporate executives have said, we're going to be pressured to spend that money on stock buybacks. And yet, out of this tax bill, we've been promised jobs and higher wages and economic growth, not if they're invested in stock buybacks. So this is, in my mind, this question has reached a critical proportion that impacts, you know, the distribution of wealth and whether hard work can get people ahead again. And the SEC has some basic responsibilities, especially since they opened the door with the safe harbor provision in 1982.
Senator Baldwin, if the two nominees do respond to the questions you laid out in your letters and you don't like the responses that they have given you, what happens to the progress toward their confirmation? Will you continue to place a hold essentially on that confirmation progress?
Well, so here's the bottom line in the Senate. I would, without responses, and I haven't gotten them yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing them, and I have no preconceived notions about what I will see from these nominees, but I can object to a unanimous consent request to move their nominations through. But Mitch McConnell has the authority to schedule this for a vote. It only requires a simple majority these days. And that's up to him. But I hope that he and all my colleagues in the United States Senate agree that these are issues worthy of greater understanding, especially when the SEC commissioners have authority to deal